What's going on, everyone, and welcome back to another video on the channel. Welcome to some CARX Street. And in today's video, I want to make a video that I feel like I get asked about all the time, and that is basically how I tune my cars for drifting. I usually don't show the whole setup because it's going to be very repetitive every single time that I do one of these videos. I basically show my setup on how to drift in this game, and I just don't want to do it every single time. You know, I make one of these, build videos. I don't want to show every single build every single time because the setup is going to be pretty much almost the exact same every single time I make one of these videos. So basically what I want to do in today's video is kind of show you guys the whole process of me tuning a car for drifting, and hopefully I get to teach you guys a little bit of something as well, because then hopefully it'll help you guys build your own cars and you don't have to go and watch every video that you see online of, what am I gonna do with my Toyota Supra drift build? How do I build a very specific tune for my Toyota Supra? Stuff like that. Hopefully this video is going to make it so you kind of understand what the parts do, and of course then you can just apply it to your own cars and you can just build them the way you feel like you want to drive in this game and how you want to control your cars. So without further ado, let's get started. I'll hop over into the tuning shop and I'll show you guys exactly what I mean. Here's the thing. The very, very basics of building a car in this game just means give it power, not a lot of weight, make sure it changes gears very quickly, and make sure you have the correct suspension setup and tires. Very basic stuff, obviously. When it comes to engine stuff and parts, I max out everything, especially when I do builds like this. Of course, if you want to build it for a very specific class, let's say you want to build it for, let's say, C3, C4, whatever. Of course, all of these you can change, so it's different to the way I have all mine, laid out here. You can make it so it doesn't make as much power. You can reduce the turbo pressure. Obviously, that will reduce the horsepower. It'll make it drop in class, all that sort of stuff. You can make it so it's... you can also have it so the torque that you have for the actual, where the torque comes in, basically. You have a lot more torque at the lower end. You have a lot more torque in the medium range, and same with the high end. Why would you not want every single one of these maxed out? Well, because, of course, again, it gives you a lot more power, and you just don't need it, for lower class builds. For builds like this, where I just max out everything, it doesn't make that much of a difference. I really don't care that much about it. Then we go over to the drivetrain. Now, this is one thing that I haven't actually adjusted or changed on this car because I just wanted to leave it alone and leave it stock. I also obviously didn't even buy the aftermarket transmission for this thing. So basically what you do when you're here is you will end up buying... Sorry, not the aftermarket transmission, but I didn't swap the transmission. Usually, if you want the best transmission possible, it's the T50S, if I remember correctly. So this one here, it's basically like straight good gears. It changes gears instantly, and it's very, very good for doing stuff like that. Again, I wanted to have this very specific car, which if you've seen the video that I uploaded the other day, I wanted to make it very like street friendly, if that makes sense. So I kind of wanted to make it seem as if when it was changing gears, it was basically like, changing gears in the manual. Like you can hear it with the little pause and everything. So that's why this car is like this. But if you wanted to have this car to change gears as quickly as humanly possible, then definitely do that. I did, however, change, and I bought the ultimate, transmission. So it does obviously change gears a little bit quicker than the standard one. Even here, as you can see, I've done that. But I haven't adjusted the final drive or anything like that. I can even do the drivetrain losses, so I can adjust that if I really wanted to. Again, I want to make this seem as realistic as possible when it came down to just the way that the car was. So that's why I didn't make it so it's like instant gear changes and all that sort of stuff. Final drive, everything, again, I left the exact same way. Final drive, this changes how close and how far, I guess, the gear ratios are. So basically, if I bring this over more to the right, the car will accelerate quicker, but it'll have a higher top or a lower top speed. Vice versa here, this will accelerate slower, but it'll have a higher top speed if I do this, just ever so slightly. So it's not going to be like mental or crazy when you do this, but you will definitely notice a difference in doing so. Not only that, each one of these gears do the exact same thing. Obviously, the further you go to the right, the quicker you end up going in through the gears. So let's say first gear, if let's say right here, first gear's peak speed will be like, let's say 60 miles an hour. If you do it like this, it'll drop down to like 40 miles an hour or something like that. Again, I'm just giving you like an example. So that's basically how it works. It's how much top speed you will have in each one of these gears. Of course, if you bring it more to the left, then you'll make it so the gears are incredibly long. A lot of the time, the cars are going to struggle with keeping the revs up and stuff like that if you bring it way too far to the left. So again, this is all independent on each one of the cars, that you're driving. Again, if you want just a normal street build, I think the gear ratios are fine. Again, once you start changing the power for each one of the cars, then of course it's just going to be different. You know, you maybe some of the gears are going to be completely useless. Like first to fourth, maybe it'll be completely useless if you give a car that has a bajillion horsepower. You have like 1,000 horsepower in one of the cars, and you realize that basically first to fourth gear are going to be completely useless, and you're kind of just driving in fifth and sixth, which is not really ideal. Because what if you kind of want to, like, you know, get up to speed a little bit more, or go a little bit faster? So again, adjusting these for each individual car is definitely recommended. As for the body, again, like I said, I wanted to make this very street build-esque, so I didn't really do too much to it, as you can see here. Of course, you could change the weight distribution. This is very noticeable when you have, you know, stuff like mid-engine cars, stuff that has like 50-50 weight distribution. It's very noticeable when you're doing this and you're pointing it more towards the rear, more towards the front. You'll see it at the top of the screen as it changes when you're pushing this further left or further right. Again, with the more weight that you have onto the car, so if I do this and I add more weight to it, you will end up noticing that, of course, you'll have more weight going to the front or more weight going to the rear. So again, it's all to do with how you balance your weight on a lot of these cars. And again, like I said, mid-engine cars and stuff like that, or even rear-engine cars, if you want to make them so they're a little bit more balanced, you can go and work with those. This is kind of what I have set up for this. I kind of just want to have it basically for looks. I didn't really care too much about the way my spacers are set here. The wider the stance, of course, then the more, I guess, stable the car is on the road. Of course, the narrower the stance, the easier it is for the car to spin out. But the wider the stance, of course, then there's just, you know, it just improves stability for the car on the road, right? So it's a lot less difficult to spin out. Suspension is where it comes in, and you guys have to be a little bit careful with the way you're building your car. So in this game, because it's incredibly arcadey, now I'm building this for a controller setup. If you're looking for a wheel setup, then it's going to be completely different to what I'm like what I have here on the screen. But if you're looking for a controller setup, here's the main basic functions. The softer the front end compared to the rear, so the soft front, rear stiff, means that the car will end up oversteering a lot more every time you drive it. The back end will step out constantly all the time on you. Vice versa, if your front end is very stiff and your rear end is very soft, then your car will end up understeering a little bit more. Or, it depends on what the car is built like from factory, it'll end up being a little bit more balanced. That is kind of the very, very basics of suspension setup and suspension tuning. However, this is a thing that you can mess around with and change with this car, or with cars specifically in this game, especially since you're playing on controller. You can adjust a lot of these where it's mostly just for looks. Again, you can adjust stuff like stiffness and all that as you're driving around, and you can kind of see, you know, how the car handles. Again, the softer front end, you'll end up seeing how the car kind of leans into the corners. A lot of the time, it'll end up making it oversteer a little bit more. Maybe you have a little bit less control or a little bit more control over the front end, you know, how sharp the car turns in and all that sort of stuff. So this is kind of what adjusts it. Again, like I said, a lot softer front end, a lot stiffer rear end will make the car have the front end a little bit more slower in response, and it'll end up oversteering a little bit more. And again, the stiffer front end, the softer rear end will end up having the front end basically try to work the front tires a little bit more, making the car understeer a little bit more in certain situations. Again, not every single car is going to be the same, but this is kind of just the basics for it. Here's the camber, right? Camber is something that, of course, as you can see, my front wheels have quite a bit of negative camber when it comes to this. If I go over to the Ackerman value, just so you guys can see, the camber itself adjusts how flat the wheel will be when you're having pressure put on it. So when my car is fully locked, right, as you can see right now, basically steering fully locked in one direction, if I go and adjust my camber and I put it basically to almost 0, if I go to Ackerman, you can see the angle of the wheel that it's at now, and you basically have a lot less surface of the wheel touching the ground because it's incredibly cambered like this. So if I go over and I give it quite a lot of negative camber, as you can see, a lot more of the actual wheel itself, the flat part of the wheel, basically, will end up touching the ground itself when it's at full lock. So this is kind of what you want to basically, you know, focus on when you're building cars with camber. Do you want to run max camber? That's up to you if you really wanted to. It looks a bit dopey if you're running full max camber like this. I usually run it maybe just sub 10, maybe -9 is kind of just enough. -9 is enough in terms of degree. Again, you can run it with pretty much however you want it. But the further you want to go to the left, you definitely don't want to have positive angle, because it just looks, first of all, a bit weird. And then again, if you go into the Ackerman value, or just steering angle in general, just if you go over here, you can see how little contact patch you actually have with the road. And basically the car is going to be pretty much undrivable if you do that. So again, it's up to you on how you decide to run your cars. This is how I decided to run this one. I have just enough contact with the tire on the road that actually seems very, very drivable. Caster is how quickly you want your wheels to recenter again. So let's say I'm driving and I'm drifting. If I let go of all of my controls, how quickly your wheels will end up going back to the center again. So caster angle, I don't know, I can't really get rid of the text up on the screen, but basically what it means is your suspension setup. So basically, I don't know if you can see, I wonder if it shows. No, it doesn't actually show it in the thing. So basically, your strut, right, your suspension setup that's behind the wheel here, it's the angle that it's set at. So the more diagonal like this it's set at, which means the more, you know, positive caster angle that you'll have, the more that it's like this, the quicker your wheels will end up recentering by themselves as you let go of everything. So if you're playing on a wheel, you kind of want this thing to be kind of high. If you're playing on a controller, it doesn't really matter if you can have it quite a little bit lower if you really wanted to. Definitely have quite a bit of positive angle regardless, because it helps a lot with the way you're driving. It just makes it so much better for handling and for control. So definitely work around with your caster angle. Like I said, the further up you have, the quicker your wheels would want to recenter themselves, and then it's the same for this as well. Now the Ackerman value is something that I really want to explain a little bit more in depth. So the further you go to the left, as you can see, the more steering angle you have, and then vice versa, the more you go to the right, the less steering angle you have. But here is the thing with the Ackerman value. The more you go to the left, yes, you will have more steering angle, but you are practically making the car impossible to spin out. And then the more you go to the right, the more you're actually able to allow the car to spin out, but you have a lot more control over it. So here's the thing. Do you either want to have the car that never spins out, basically playing the game on the easiest settings possible, literally what this is, or you want to be able to have full control over your car, right, with max value here, max degrees, but then you'll also have the chance of spinning out, and you will have to work a little bit harder in controlling your car. Here's the thing though, you can also do reverse entries if you put the Ackerman angle all the way up. If you put it all the way down to the left, it is pretty much impossible to do any reverse entries or anything like that, because the game just doesn't let you. You will not be able to spin out to the point where you're going to be able to do this. So again, play with this with the way you want. I'm going to recommend you start from 10. Start from the very lowest possible amount, and you'll be able to see how easy it is to drift with this thing. And then the higher you go, obviously, you'll be able to see how much of a difficult time it is to steer. I usually run mine slightly lower, because this is a very arcade game, so I don't really care about playing too competitively. Of course, if I want to build my car so I can like reverse entry and stuff like that, I'll obviously end up bringing it a lot higher. But this is kind of, I'm pretty sure what the setup was like. Something similar to this. I don't remember exactly where. Oh, this is where it was. It was a 48, because this is where the value was at. So I'm gonna bring it. I'll probably keep it around the same point that it was before. Steering angle, very self-explanatory. Of course, you want the extra steering angle. You know, you don't want it to drive like this, especially if you're building for drifting. You want the most amount of steering angle. That's kind of obvious. Toe is a very interesting one. Usually running very little toe in the front is fine. Because your wheels are constantly turned all the time, I run a little bit of positive toe like that, and then again with the actual suspension itself, I kind of want it to be a little bit softer in the front than anything else. And apart from that, I didn't really do anything else there. If I go over to the rear, as you can see, I kind of just built this thing so it stands out nicely. So you know, lowest possible spring length, slightly stiffer, again slightly stiffer here as well. Camber for the rear, you kind of want to have almost no camber at all. I run a little bit just because of looks. It doesn't really do anything too differently. Obviously, what you want is you want to have as flat of a possible patch as possible on the rear end with this thing, because it'll end up helping out with how the actual you know, contact patch on the road is. So you obviously want as much as possible if you want to be able to push the car along as well as possible. So you want very little camber for the rear end, but this is why I have kind of extra toe on the rear as well, because this also helps to be able to push the rear end forward a little bit more. If I was to run everything on 0-0, it'll be practically the same, except I kind of prefer the look of this thing. So again, a little bit of extra toe on the rear actually helps push the car along a little bit more. So yeah. And then for the rear dampers, I really didn't need to change anything. I kind of like the way this drives like this. Obviously, a lot of the people, you know, you have your different preferences. You may want to have, you know, the front end a lot higher off the ground and a lot stiffer. The rear end, you may want a little bit softer. It's all to do with your preference, but this setup just seems to work fine for me, in my opinion. Braking force, I kind of just have it, so it's just a little bit of extra force on the front, and that's pretty much it. There's nothing too crazy there. Now, the next thing that I really want to show you guys is in the settings, and that's in controls here. So let me show you guys exactly what this is. So clutch mode, I usually leave it to automatic, because it's just normal to have it on automatic. You will still have the actual button itself binded for the clutch, so I still have my binded, obviously, and it still works. You can still use the clutch yourself if you really wanted to, which I do when it comes to drifting. I sometimes, you know, clutch kick, and it works perfectly fine. So you leave this thing on automatic. It doesn't mean that it'll change gears manually or automatic for you, because as you can see, the gearbox type is still manual. So I still, as you can see, change gears normally, but I can still press my clutch in, as you can see, and still use the clutch regardless of if I have it on or off there. So that's what I'm saying. Leave this on automatic because it just makes life a lot easier for you. And then, of course, gearbox, keep that on manual. Vibration, that's all up to you if you really want any of that. Counter steering, on or off. I haven't really noticed a big difference with this thing, so if I leave this thing on off, it generally doesn't feel like much of a difference, because the game still does it for you. If I leave this thing on off, I can basically drive like this, and I'm not pressing any of the buttons, by the way, right now. The game basically is just drifting for me because of the way my setup is. If I have it like this, all I really need to do is basically playing the game like on the easiest settings possible, like this, by the way. So I don't really have to do anything right now. I can just have the game kind of counter steer for me. But the thing is though, if I put on counter steering on, that doesn't mean that I'm actually end up turning my wheels off to the right to be able to counter steer, because that will still straighten up my wheels. So if I do this, and I go over to controls, I change that back, I'll show you guys exactly what I mean. Do the exact same thing. If I let go of all the buttons, as you can see, the car goes back into a straight line again. So I'm not technically counter steering, I'm just steering even more into the corner. This is the setup I usually prefer to have. It just makes it so much better for me. I feel like I'm definitely in a lot more control if I have it like this. And as you can see, I'm constantly working myself, but I'm not really counter steering. I'm still steering more into the corner. I wish I could show you guys like an overlay of my controller, but I'm basically just steering more into the corner. I'm not actually counter steering, because if I counter steer, I just end up going the other way. So right now, if I do this, if I fully go the other way, as you can see, I just change direction. So it's not, you're not actually counter steering. I know it says counter steering, but it's not actually counter steering in this game. You're just kind of steering even more into the corner. So again, it's up to you which way you want to play with the counter steering option here yourselves. I prefer to have a bit more control on my cars, so I usually have that turned that way. If I go down over to the assist, this is pretty much what you can see here. Stabilization I have on 0. Angle stabilization on drift I have it at 50%. And then the assistance settings, I have it on the standard assistance. This is pretty much the way my game is pretty much set up right now. As you can see, cars are super easy to control. I mean, I can pretty much place them wherever I want to. It's kind of hard for me to spin the car out as well. I mean, I can still do it if I really want to, but it's just the way I have it built. It's definitely made so I can still send it almost fully backwards, and I'm still able to control the slide. Well, I really do hope that this answered your questions on how I do my drift builds. And hopefully people don't ask me to show every single one of my tunes every time I do one of these build videos, because they're all going to be somewhat similar to each other. I'm going to be maybe adjusting a few things here and there, but most of the time it's going to be incredibly similar for pretty much every single one of the builds. I'm definitely more of an aesthetic type builder, so as in like, I want the car to be looking and driving as smooth as I possibly can. I don't really care about being overly competitive when it comes to, you know, doing my builds or whatever it is that people end up doing. I kind of wanted to just have it as easy as possible, but also that I have, you know, full control over the car itself. So that's kind of what my entire setup is looking like when it comes to drifting. So hopefully, like I said, you guys enjoyed today's video. Hopefully it helped a lot of you guys out. If you had any questions on how I build my cars, some people may do it differently, which is perfectly fine. You know, other people may enjoy to drive the cars a different way. That's why there's so many like settings and so much customization available for the cars in this game. So you can do so many different things to the cars and have them drive in whatever way that you feel like you want to have them drive, you know? And that's what's the best thing about this game. So there's no like fully 100% or 100% wrong or 100% correct way of doing stuff in this game, because other people, you know, may enjoy driving the cars differently, and they may enjoy, you know, building the cars a very specific way. So again, it's not always going to be 100% right or 100% wrong. I'm just showing you guys the way I build my cars, and they seem to work out fine. I seem to enjoy, you know, the way they drive and how I end up building them. They seem to turn out all right. So that's pretty much how my builds go. So that's pretty much it for me. Thank you for watching, everybody. I hope you enjoyed today's video. If you want to see more videos like this on the channel, then of course subscribe, like this video if you enjoyed it. And I'm gonna head off and probably play a little bit more with my Supra, because I actually really like this thing that I built a couple of days ago. All right, well, that's it. Thank you for watching, everybody, and I will see you in the next video. Goodbye, everyone.